What's up, everybody? Finally have my season predictions done for the year. I would have had them out a lot earlier, but Ezekiel Elliott's suspension turning into a non-suspension kind of ruined everything, and I had to completely redo this whole video in one night, so that sucked. But I am glad that Zeke is going to be able to play this year. It significantly impacts my outlook for the Cowboys, and by extension, the NFC as a whole. So again, I had to completely redo everything. And how I formulated these predictions were, I didn't just slide in a team and say, okay, I think, the Falcons are going to win this division, the Patriots are going to win that division. I actually predicted the outcomes for all 256 games this season to kind of more organically generate what records I thought every team was going to finish with. So I actually didn't know what the results were going to be until I finished projecting every single game for the season. So it's not a whole bunch of phantom games in there where every team is 10-6 or 9-7 or 11-5. There are teams in there that I predicted to finish with well below average records compared to what most people are going to think, just because when I was going through their schedules, I found a lot more losses than I originally anticipated. So that's how I put this whole thing together. I guess it's the most scientific method I could think of to get accurate rankings and accurate standings and accurate playoff seeding and Super Bowl predictions and all that. So we'll run through all of the divisions one by one. I've got the Texans winning the AFC South, the Steelers winning the AFC North, the Patriots, of course, winning the East, the Chiefs winning the West. Moving on to the NFC, I've got Atlanta, Green Bay, Philadelphia, and the Seahawks winning their respective divisions. And I have in the AFC the wild cards being Denver and Tennessee, who tied, but by virtue of the conference record, when I projected it being in favor of Denver, I have them as the 5th seed and Tennessee as the 6th seed. On the NFC side, I've got Tampa Bay finishing 11-5. They're going to be the 5th seed, and Dallas is the 6th seed, which again, the Ezekiel Elliott playing all year heavily impacted that. Originally, I had Arizona in there, but with Zeke back, I think Dallas will be the 6th seed when all is said and done. Let's kind of look at each individual division a little bit closer, starting with the AFC South. The Texans, I got them finishing 10-6. Just a minor improvement over what they got last year, mainly because of a minor improvement in the quarterback situation. They still have an elite defense, potentially an average offense, which is really all they need to make noise. They can try to formulate or at least copy the formula of the Broncos a couple years ago, where they just play defense and they run the ball and they don't turn it over, and they kind of make it all the way to the Super Bowl that way. That is their goal. They're not going to win any shootouts. They're going to win with defense and running the ball. And I think at the end of the day, that's going to win them the division. They're going to be 10-6, tied with the Titans, but by virtue of a division record tiebreaker, I had the Texans taking it over Tennessee, who again is the wild card team coming out of the South. The Jags I have at 6-10, a slight improvement over where they were the last couple years, but really I don't think they're going to be able to unlock the full potential of that roster until they get rid of Blake Bortles. And at least at 6-10, they'll still have enough draft capital that if they like a quarterback in the draft, they'll be able to move up. The Colts, surprisingly, I even kind of surprised myself and had them finishing at 6-10, mostly because in the early season I had them falling behind with a bunch of losses because we really don't know what's going to happen with Andrew Luck. If he was healthy from day one, I think they would have a serious chance to make a run at the division, but I think there's realistically they could fall into a hole very early here in the division and fall behind and just not be able to catch up. I do think they're still going to, cap a couple games off the Titans and the Jags and the Texans in the division. But in terms of winning outside the division, I don't have a ton of faith in their ability to win without Andrew Luck. In fact, I have no faith to win without their franchise quarterback. So I think they're just going to fall into an early hole and not be able to get out. All right, moving on real quick to the AFC North. I've got Pittsburgh winning that division at 11-5. When I was going into it, I kind of expected them to finish 12-4 or 13-3, just kind of glancing at the schedule. But there was a couple games in there that I projected them to lose in that classic Mike Tomlin trap game fashion. It happens to them at least once or twice a year where, they play a game against a team that they really should beat, and they just don't. They play down to their competition. It's been a problem for a long time, especially on the road. Roethlisberger is a completely different quarterback on the road. So I think there's a couple games that they're going to drop to teams that they really shouldn't lose to. But in the end, they're still going to be one of the major threats in the AFC to represent the conference in the Super Bowl. I think they are going to finish 11-5. They are going to win the division, and they are going to at least make the divisional round in the playoffs. I feel pretty confident about that. As long as they stay healthy, they should be fine. Cincinnati, I think, is going to take a little bit of a step back this year just because of losses on personnel. I think they got hit in free agency, especially along the offensive line. I'm not really feeling them as much this year as I did in years prior. I think this might be one of the last, if not the last season for Marvin Lewis, just because, they couldn't get over the hump even when they were one of the most talented teams in the league. And now, outside of the skill positions, I don't think they have enough talent on the team to cover for their coaching deficiencies. So I do think they're going to finish with an average record, and this will, in my opinion, this will probably be Marvin Lewis's last ride. He had a great career in Cincinnati, but I think it's time for them to seriously start considering other options at head coach. You could do a hell of a lot worse, but I think you could do better as well. Baltimore, I finished 7-9, mainly just because they're so damn injured. There's a lot of games, especially early in the year, that kind of a similar thing to the Colts, where I think they're going to fall into a hole early and just not be able to crawl out of it. And if they were full strength, I think they could challenge for the division, but they're not going to be full strength at all this year. There's no way. They've lost so many people to IR completely for the season, not just short-term IR, but just so many people that are gone for the entire year that I don't know if they're going to be able to mount a serious challenge for the North. I think a team this crippled by injuries will probably finish in the middle of the pack record-wise, and it's unfortunate for them because this was a very promising season that just kind of got derailed before it even began. Cleveland rounding out the AFC North, actually doing better than they have in recent seasons. I think 6 wins is a win for them, no pun intended. In terms of where the roster was at a year ago and where it's at now, I think 6 wins with a young and very talented team, but again, very young. That would be very encouraging for them. I think it would be a good growth opportunity for Deshaun Kaiser and Jabril Peppers and Myles Garrett, and start to get this team back on the track to winning a lot more meaningful games. When you go 1-15 or 2-14, you get the number 1 overall pick. If you can come back and win 6 games the next year and at least show progress towards getting back to prominence, that's enough for me. And I think this season, we'll see progress from them. So I'm excited to see that. I think, if anything, they deserve a 6-win season, if not more than that, more than almost any other fan base out there, because, it's hard to lose 15 games in a year. It's hard to watch that. So if they can get at least a few more wins than usual out of 2017, I think Browns fans will be pretty happy. Moving on to the East, this is pretty much a no-brainer. I've got New England winning it, going their usual 12-4-ish in the record. I only had them losing 4 games and went through their schedule. KC was one of them. I changed my projections after the KC game, so KC counted as one of their losses. They're still an elite team. Even though they kind of got pantsed on national television, they're still an elite team. They're still the Patriots, and I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, because the last time I didn't give them the benefit of the doubt, which was ironically also when they got pantsed by Kansas City on national television, they went on and won the Super Bowl. So I'm not too worried about it. They're still in a weak division. They're still going to win 12 games. They're still probably going to be the first or second seed in the whole conference. They'll be fine. It's New England. As for the rest of the division, the Jets I've got as bottom feeders. Like most people project, I think they might win 1-2 at most games this season. Buffalo, I think, will be right there with them. I've got them going 2-14. Miami, I think, will be in the middle of the pack at around 7-9, which they'll probably be better than their record. But man, their schedule's tough this year. They got a lot of really hard games. They're playing 16 games in a row too, which is just it wears you down. I think if they had a normal bye week at week 11, maybe they could have snuck into a 9-7 kind of record, 8-8 at least. But man, they're facing a long grind this year, and I don't know if they have the pure talent to overcome that. So 7-9, it's not terrible. It's probably not what they were hoping for in the beginning of the year, but when your starting quarterback goes down with an ACL tear and you lose your bye week before the season even starts. It's hard to imagine them doing much better than that. So, there's always 2018, I guess. AFC West, I've got KC winning the division. I originally had them projected for 11-5, but after they beat the Patriots, I've got them going 12-4. They will, at least in my projections, end up as the first seed in the AFC. The playoffs will run through Arrowhead, which is bad news for every other team in the conference. It's very tough to win there, even if you are the Patriots or the Steelers. So, that was a monumental win for Kansas City on Thursday night. In terms of playoff seeding, I think it's going to really benefit them in the long run, and they have a legitimate shot to to set their own destiny all the way to the Super Bowl. It's been a while since I've thought that about the Chiefs, but if Alex Smith keeps playing like he did on Thursday night and he actually airs it out downfield and he shows a little bit of aggressiveness, I mean, this could be a very dangerous team. So I'm excited to see what they do for the rest of the season, and I'm excited to see if they can actually prove me wrong on Alex Smith limiting their potential. Behind them, Denver, I've got them going 10-6 over the Raiders and the Chargers, which are the sexier picks, I guess you could say, in the AFC West. I think Denver takes a big step up this year, especially with Trevor Siemian getting one more year of starting experience. Their offensive line is better. Their running game should be better. Their defense is just as good as ever. I think they're a very well-rounded team that can win in a lot of different ways. And I think when you look at some of the more one-dimensional teams in the AFC, Oakland being one of them, I think Denver has the defense and the balance to eventually win out over Oakland in terms of getting that wild card spot. I really, really like their prospects this season. Again, Oakland, I have narrowly missing the playoffs. Not having a bad season, but just I think they need to find a little bit more balance in terms of building out the defense and getting a new franchise running back that isn't a very old Marshawn Lynch. I think if they can establish a very strong run game, and maybe if their defense just performs above expectations, they can make a run at a wild card spot. But I just didn't see that during the preseason. I'm not sure if they'll be able to change course now. To me, they're a one-dimensional team that completely rides on Derek Carr's ability to pass the football, which, I mean, there's a lot worse things that you can rely on than Derek Carr, I think, is an MVP candidate. But, one-dimensional teams usually, as the months go on, especially in December football and you're trying to make the playoffs, you got to be balanced. And I don't think they're very balanced. And rounding out the division, I've got the LA Chargers finishing 6-10. This is predominantly a product of having three better teams in the division. I don't think the Chargers are a bad team. I think they can actually sneak up and play with almost anybody on their best day. It's very talented. But they're in one of the, if not the most competitive divisions in football. And they've got two teams in that division that are built to stop the Chargers in terms of KC and Denver that both play great pass defense. I'm not super optimistic about their record. I think they're a threat to everyone they play, but I think their record is not going to finish as strong as their actual team is, if that makes sense. Somebody's going to lose these games. Somebody has to. And I think out of all the teams in the AFC West and out of all the division games they play, I think the Chargers are going to come out on the short end of that straw. It's unfortunate for them, but there were just too many games that I was looking at against the rest of that division that I didn't think that they could win. So, they're a sneaky good team, but I don't think their record's going to be that good. And that brings us over to the NFC side of things, starting with the NFC South. I've got Atlanta and Tampa Bay tied at the top at 11-5, with Atlanta winning it by virtue of having a better division record, at least projected division record. I think they're still an elite team in the NFC. They're not going to win as many games as they did last year, just because it's almost impossible to win that many games. But I think they are a threat to everyone they play, every other elite contender in the NFL, both conferences, it doesn't matter. I think they can play with anyone. I think they can absolutely play with anyone. They're a very balanced team. They've still got an elite offense. I think their defense is even better than it was last year, especially since you got Trufant back. I don't want to play them. I don't think any team would actually want to play the Falcons. They are that dangerous, and I don't think it's completely crazy to project them winning the NFC South, which is another one of those divisions where you could argue they're the best division in the league from top to bottom. It's a very competitive division, which is why they're probably going to lose 4 or 5 games this year. But if you're the best team in that division and you're kind of trial by combat for 17 weeks straight, you're a pretty damn good team. So I've got them emerging as the king of the hill at 11-5, and I do think they're going to end up being the number 1 seed in the NFC. And I know 11-5 sounds kind of low for a number 1 seed, but the NFC is completely loaded this year. And if you can emerge as the top dog in the NFC, it really doesn't matter what your record is because you've already shown yourself to be a very good team. So I think they're going to be the number 1 team in the conference. Everything's going to run through Atlanta and that beautiful new stadium, and they're probably going to ride that home field advantage straight back to the Super Bowl. As for Tampa Bay, again, a very strong, very balanced team. I think they're going to be the 5th seed, but you could argue that they're the 2nd or 3rd best team in the whole conference. If they ended up going to Atlanta in the divisional round of the playoffs and giving them all they could handle, I wouldn't be surprised. They've got weapons all over the place in Mike Evans and Deshaun Jackson and O.J. Howard and Cameron Brate and Doug Martin. Their offensive line isn't bad. Their defense is good. I mean, the quarterback, obviously Jameis Winston is very good. They've got a lot that they can throw at you both offensively and defensively, and there's very few teams that can handle that. They're going to be a contender from start to finish, and unlike Miami, I do think they have the talent to withstand that 16 straight game grind. Miami straight up is not good enough to get worn down like that and still win football games, but I think the Bucs are. I think they're going to surprise a lot of people. And speaking of surprising a lot of people, I think the Saints are going to be right there with them. I don't have them making the playoffs because, again, the NFC is completely loaded and there's a bajillion teams that finish 10-6, but they are going to be a threat to every single team they play. They're very balanced this year in terms of offense and defense and having a strong running game. Usually when the Saints have all 3 of those components, they're a very dangerous team, and this year is no different. The fact that they're in the best division in football is what's keeping them out of the playoffs. This is a team that, in my opinion, is good enough to win half the divisions in the league. They just happen to be in the hardest one. It's not an indictment against them, it's just bad luck. Just like the Falcons and the Bucs, nobody wants to play the Saints, nor should they. And you know who else nobody wants to play? The Carolina Panthers. When's the last time the projected worst team in the division was above 500? This is a really good team that, again, is trapped in a division with a whole bunch of other really good teams. They're all going to cannibalize each other to an extent. We know that. It's just, the Panthers, at least to me, are probably going to get cannibalized the most. They've got a ton of weapons with Kelvin Benjamin and Christian McCaffrey and Greg Olsen and Jonathan Stewart and, of course, the legs of Cam Newton. I mean, offensively, they present a lot of problems to people. Defensively, they still got a good front 7, especially with their linebacking core. Their secondary is okay, but it's not bad. It's a very balanced team. Not as balanced as the rest of the division, but they are very balanced, and they do present a threat to pretty much everyone they're going to play. I will never ever feel comfortable as a fan of another team playing against Carolina because Cam Newton is the kind of player that can take over a game. When you have that kind of quarterback on your roster, anything is possible. So just because I have them finishing 4th in the division doesn't mean they won't win it. When you have Cam Newton, a former MVP, one of the most talented quarterbacks I've ever seen in my entire life, anything is possible. Do not count them out just yet, even though this video technically already has. But anyway, NFC North, I've got Green Bay winning it at 10-6, Minnesota at 8-8, Detroit at 7-9, and Chicago at 3-13. I'll start from bottom to top this time. I think Chicago's better than a 3-13 record, but their schedule is just so unbelievably brutal that winning 3 to 5 games at most is probably where they're going to end up being. They're just not talented enough to overcome this kind of schedule yet. It's a really bad luck of the draw this year. They just happen to be playing against a bunch of really strong teams, and there's not much to be said beyond that. Detroit goes 7-9 because, in my opinion, they still got some pretty bad roster deficiencies that are going to keep them from being serious contenders. I think Matt Stafford was the only reason they won so many games last year. In terms of the number of 2-minute drill comebacks and all the heroics and everything like that, it's almost impossible to replicate that kind of stuff from year to year. As good of a quarterback that Matt Stafford is, and I love the dude, but it's just not repeatable. You can't do that 2 years in a row and expect to be successful. So I do expect a slight regression there in Detroit. Not that they're a terrible team, but you don't win that many one-score games in that kind of fashion and then come back and do it again the next year. Nobody's able to do that. Minnesota, I've got 1 game ahead of them at 8-8. They've got pretty much the same problems that they did last year in terms of having an elite defense, but a very underwhelming offense. I think outside of Stephon Diggs, they don't really have any great receivers they can rely on. Dalvin Cook, I think, is a wonderful rookie running back, but he just doesn't have an offensive line in front of him. Sam Bradford, at least to me, is the very definition of an average quarterback. I mean, they've got a lot of problems up there offensively. They need another really good infusion of offensive talent in the draft, both in the trenches and in the skill positions, and I don't see that happening until next year. Hopefully by then Teddy Bridgewater will be back and healthy, and they'll be able to use all these new young weapons to his benefit and not Sam Bradford's. And that brings us to Green Bay, who will once again rule the NFC North under Aaron Rodgers. I think they're going to be the number 2 seed in the conference, narrowly beating out the other 10-6 teams, Philadelphia and Seattle, by virtue of tiebreakers. You know, it's same old song and dance. Elite quarterback, immense trust in his receiving core. He's got Ty Montgomery, he's got Martellus Bennett. They're going to be able to move the ball both on the ground and in the air, and their defense should be average as well. There is no reason why an Aaron Rodgers quarterback team with all this versatility and weaponry shouldn't be considered a legitimate Super Bowl contender. They've got just as much of a shot of going all the way as anybody else, primarily because of number 12. And that's why I've got them winning the 2 seed in the conference. Now, moving on to the NFC East, which as usual is a massive, unpredictable clusterfuck of epic proportions. I guess I have to make a prediction, so I'm going to go with the Eagles to win this division at 10-6. The Cowboys, as I mentioned earlier, will also be 10-6, but by having a better division record, I think that tiebreaker will swing it towards the Eagles in the end. They've got an incredible front seven in Philly. It's stacked from top to bottom. I think that's going to carry them to a lot of wins this year. Their receiving core is much better than it was a year ago by adding Alshon Jeffrey. I think Carson Wentz finally has a reliable number 1 weapon to throw to. They still can't run the ball worth a damn, but as long as they can throw the ball and play good defense, they should be just fine. And speaking of running the ball, I think that's exactly what the Cowboys are going to do now that they have Ezekiel Elliott back for the full year. I think every single week they're going to pound it between the tackles and let Zeke carry them back to the playoffs. In fact, I think they're going to take away a playoff spot from the Cardinals by running it down their throat early in the season. Keep in mind, I also have Arizona finishing 10-6, but since I'm projecting the Cowboys to beat them head-to-head, they're the ones who get the playoff spot. That, to me, is why Zeke coming back is so important. It could be the difference between going to the playoffs and not. Right behind the Cowboys, I've got the Giants at 8-8, who I think are a very talented team, especially in the receiving core and on defense, but I think their deficiencies in the offensive line and in the linebacking core are just way too much for them to overcome. They desperately need to restock that offensive line, and I don't think they're going to go very far until they do. Eli Manning still has a few good years left in him, so they do have some time to fix this problem, but they really need to get on it sooner rather than later. And just one game below New York, I've got Washington finishing last at 7-9. Again, this is another case of a team being way better than their record, but as I was going through their schedule, it's brutal. It's absolutely brutal. I think there's a few games against other contending teams that they're going to lose very close simply because of personnel matchups that I don't think are going to go their way. And, it's going to be that kind of year. I think it's going to be a disappointing season because it's a team that is talented and it's good enough to go to the playoffs, but I think they are going to fall short. Somebody in that division has to fall short. And at the end of the day, I think the Redskins are the most likely team to be the odd man out. And that brings us to the last division, the NFC West. I mentioned earlier that I have the Seahawks winning it at 10-6 by virtue of a third tiebreaker being common opponents with Arizona. Arizona, because of that loss tiebreaker, would miss the playoffs because, as I mentioned earlier, the Cowboys also hold a tiebreaker over them in this scenario. So they're a very good team at 10-6, just narrowly missing the playoffs because of tiebreakers. It's a very loaded conference. I've said it over and over and over again. Somebody has to be the odd man out in the NFC. At the end of the day, I think it's going to be the Cardinals. They have a legitimate shot to win the division. I think they'll probably split with the Seahawks, but ultimately their season might come down to whether or not they beat the Cowboys. If they can beat Dallas, then I think they're on track to make the postseason. If not, it's going to be really hard for them. So keep an eye on that game early in the year. It very well could determine who is and is not playing January football. So with all the divisions covered, let's take a look at the seeding. In the AFC, I've got KC 1, New England 2, Pitt 3, Houston 4, Denver at 5 by virtue of the tiebreaker with conference record. And again, I've got Tennessee at 6. The NFC seeding, we've got Atlanta, Green Bay by virtue of a tiebreaker, Seattle, then Philadelphia, again by virtue of a tiebreaker, Tampa Bay, and then Dallas, again with another tiebreaker. Will all of this happen in exactly this way? I can almost guarantee it won't. But in terms of the information that we have now, that I can project forward into the future, this is how I see everything being seeded. And based on these seeds, I do think we are going to get an Atlanta versus New England rematch for the ages in the Super Bowl. I think it's the two best teams in the league overall, two high-octane offenses. I think that Atlanta is more balanced overall than New England, though, especially on defense, which is why I think if they get another crack at the champ, they are going to win the whole damn thing. So put me down for Atlanta this year as the Super Bowl champs in a remarkable revenge saga against the New England Patriots. As for your season-ending awards, I've got Russell Wilson winning his first MVP award by dragging his team to the playoffs over a resurgent Arizona squad. I've got Le'Veon Bell winning Offensive Player of the Year as a versatile running and receiving threat. I've got Defensive Player of the Year going to Justin Houston, who looked phenomenal in the season opener against New England. I think he's finally back to his former self that can get 18, 19, 20 plus sacks in a season. He's a tremendous player, one of the elite pass rushers of our time, and I think he's going to get his first Defensive Player of the Year award this year. I've also got his teammate, running back Kareem Hunt, winning the Offensive Rookie of the Year award. I actually thought he was going to win this award ever since Spencer Ware went down a few weeks ago, just because he's got the opportunity and the talent and a head coach that knows how to use him. But oh my God, even I didn't predict how he was going to play in the season opener. I mean, that was just remarkable. To start his career like that is just incredible. And if the rest of his rookie year is even 75% as good as that, he'll win this award no problem. On the other side of the ball, I've got Niners linebacker Reuben Foster winning Defensive Rookie of the Year. I think he is a tremendous linebacker prospect who fell all the way to the end of the first round in the draft for reasons that, to be honest, have nothing to do with how he plays football. I think he could not have found a better mentor than Navarro Bowman, just like Navarro Bowman found Patrick Willis as a mentor when he entered the league. And ultimately, I do think that Reuben Foster is going to be San Francisco's new Patrick Willis. He is that talented. He's got sideline to sideline speed, he can cover, he brings the hit stick on every single tackle. I mean, the dude just lights people up. I'm really excited to watch him play. I think he's going to be a great asset to that Niners defense, and they could not have had a better pick in the end of the first round. Very, very good pick. He's going to pay dividends for the next decade. And that brings me to the Comeback Player of the Year and also probably Walter Payton Man of the Year, J.J. Watt. I think he makes his triumphant return to the league in 2017 and gets a whole boatload of sacks. He's going to be playing with Jadeveon Clowney and Whitney Merciless, so ideally protection will not be as heavy on him as it has been in the past. And the more single teams he gets, the more sacks he's going to get. You can lock him in for double-digit sacks right now, and he'll probably compete for Defensive Player of the Year too when all's said and done. Will he get the triple crown of Man of the Year, Comeback Player of the Year, and Defensive Player of the Year? I don't know about that, but I do think at the very least he will get Comeback Player. And that brings me to the final award, which is Coach of the Year. I'm giving it to Andy Reid, not just because he beat Bill Belichick in the opener, but because I do think that they're going to be an elite team in the AFC. I think they're going to finish as the first seed in the AFC, and if he can take this roster and not only outdo Bill Belichick, but then maintain that lead over Belichick for the whole year in order to get home field advantage, that is a special accomplishment. It's a very special accomplishment. You can't just beat Belichick once. You have to beat him for the whole year so that you don't have to go to Foxborough. And I think engineering your team and engineering your season to not have to go to Foxborough by maintaining your lead for the whole year, that is worthy of Coach of the Year. He did a fantastic job this offseason. He did an even better job in Week 1, and I think he's going to do an even better job than that in the next 15 games. So Andy Reid, he's my Coach of the Year. These are all of my awards. This is my Super Bowl pick, my playoff seeding, my individual records, my division winners. Every single prediction I can possibly make has been made in this video. If you want to know anything else more specific, feel free to leave a comment. I'll try to get to whoever I can. As you guys are asking more questions, there's probably going to be a lot of them, so I won't get to everybody, but I will get to whatever questions I can if there are other predictions you want that are a little bit more specific than these. But again, these are all the records for every single team and who I got winning the Super Bowl. Thank you very much for watching this season's predictions. I know they're coming a little bit later than most other predictions, but with Zeke being unsuspended, I kind of had to juggle everything around and completely redo it because his suspension and then unsuspension completely changes the season for pretty much every team in the NFC. So again, I apologize for everything coming late, but that ruling by the judge was just so monumental that I couldn't release the original video in its previous form. It would have made no sense. But again, thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate all the support. On the screen here are all my new Patreon subscribers from the past few days. I can't believe the support you guys have shown me, and of course the support you guys showed to the Rodriguez family a few days ago. It really touched me how much you guys kind of opened your hearts to them and really kind of tried to help them out. It's amazing what you guys are able to do when you come together. I'm really proud of everybody. You guys are just incredible. You're the best fans I could possibly ask for. but I can thank you with a special gift, and that is true, proper Film Room episodes coming out every single week on a range of topics. It could be breaking down a game that happened the previous week. It could be previewing a matchup from an upcoming game. We're going to do film sessions every week. We're going to learn a lot together, and this season's just going to be a whole lot of fun. I got a ton of different content coming your way that you're all going to love, so just stay tuned, keep checking the channel, subscribe, get your notifications on so that everybody can see when new stuff is posted. I promise you're all going to love it. Thank you very much for your support, and I'll see you guys next week.